Hello and welcome to Conversations for the People with Matthew Solomon. I'm Matthew Solomon, and I'm really excited today. My dear friend Renee Johnston is going to be a guest on the show. And wow, we met probably about a year or so ago. She hosted our screening, Reimagining Safety screening in Montclair, New Jersey, and we just became very, very close friends. I consider her family, and she's awesome. She's also one of the most thorough citizen investigators, researchers that I know. She's got a database on all the cop cities being built and a ton of data on those. Uh, Project 2025. She's done a lot of work on the Harris campaign and the connections that go back many, many years, which we're going to get into. She's going to talk about. And I'm really excited. So Renee Johnston is an abolitionist. She's a political education event organizer, former educator, and she's a union member. Also, she currently serves as a committee chair for the Green Party of New Jersey and is a member of the Black Alliance for Peace. In addition to that, because she does a lot of things, she hosts the weekly show Saturdays with Renee on Black Liberation Media, which is they're on YouTube. It's blackliberationmedia.org. We'll put that in the show notes. And she's a community journalist for Public Square Amplified. She does a ton of work. Her website is isyourlifebetter.com, which is where she has all the information. But we're going to get into it. Please welcome to the show my dear friend Renee Johnston. I'm particularly excited to be interviewing you because there's, first of all, we're friends. I mean, I consider you family at this point.
Definitely,
And
100%.
and
You've
like,
been trapped with my crazy family. Definitely, yes.
yes. So and I know you do a lot, and I'm always learning more about more things you do. And just like real quick, I'm in a PhD program, and I was sharing with you last semester that I was looking up some Cop City stuff, and I was on this website, and I was gathering information, and then when it came time to cite it, your name came up as the author, and I was like, oh, of course, this is you, and I'm citing you, and I didn't even know this particular page existed. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so it's awesome to have you. Just to share with folks, like my version of how we met was we were in a Twitter group, and you were like, "Hey, I'd like to do a screening in New Jersey," and we started talking from there. But your
Hmm.
version is a little different, so I'd love if
Well,
you, yeah.
right. So, truthfully, I saw you long before I realized we were in that Twitter group because you did, what was it? The Leftist Mafia? Is that the name
Oh
of it?
yeah, yeah, left.
Right.
Yeah,
So you got invited on by Ole,
yeah,
and she interviewed you about the project. And I was like, oh, this is super cool. And then I couldn't figure out how to watch it. I was like on this mission because I really
yeah.
wanted to watch it. Um, and so I started following your page, and then I was like, okay, he's not doing anything like near me. How am I going to get to watch this movie? And then you posted in our Twitter chat group like your upcoming screenings. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my goodness, how did this happen? I'm in a Twitter group with them. And so my Twitter stalking ended because it turned out that I had like a direct link to you.
Yeah.
So by the time I sent you that note, I had actually been like stalking you on Twitter for a couple of weeks, trying to figure out how I was going to see the documentary. So it worked out great. And shout out to Ole because she
Yeah.
took a Uber to Jersey to sit on the panel
Yeah,
afterwards.
that's right. That's right. I didn't even get a picture with her. She left so quick afterwards.
Yeah,
I was
she
like,
ran.
ah,
She was like,
yeah.
I gotta go.
Yeah.
So it
So
was
yeah, so
cool.
we did the reimagining safety screening in Montclair, New
Hmm.
Jersey.
Hmm.
There were some twists and turns with that, but it was awesome. We had, I think, like 80, 90 people or
Yeah,
something, pretty big panel. And
yeah.
then you started connecting me with folks in Washington State, and that's how I got connected with the Black Panther Party there. And
Hmm.
that turned into more stuff. And then Boston, you connected me with somebody there. And so you've really been a big part of the, almost, well, I guess when this airs, it'll be 64 community screenings across the US. So thank
which
you.
is so awesome
Yeah.
that people are seeing it. So it's such a good documentary.
No.
And I've now seen it like 6 times, and every time I see it, I'm like, damn, this is so good.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I'm not tired of it either. And
No, it's great. It's
yeah.
great work.
But I'd love to get into the work that you do, and there's so much. I mean, and you're a researcher. Like you when you say you were stalking me, now I know, right, how much went into that. So like well, first of all, so you have a is it a website or a database? Is your life better, right? Is
Right.
the
Yeah,
and
it's a website, and when I fall down these rabbit holes and I have databases that I feel like, open source, I want people to be able to access, I just kind of drop them into the website so people can get to them relatively easily. I actually have a couple of them that I need to drop in there
yeah.
still.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it. But it's mostly so I don't have to like email them to people, right? Like I can
Mm.
just say, go to the website and it's on the website, and feel free. I don't, I get yelled at often because people are like, how am I supposed to find you? Your name's not on there, and you don't get credit, you don't take
Yeah.
credit. And, for me, a lot of it is just mostly about giving information. It's not really about getting the credit or making a name or, being an influencer. Like I don't really, that stuff's not really important to me as
Yeah.
much as it is to just make sure that the information is accessible. Um, and my rabbit holes are all pure like nosiness. Like I don't, it's not like I've been trained in research or anything like that. It's more like I come across this little bit of information and I'm trying to understand, like, well, how did this happen, or where did this come from, or what else is going on back here that no one's paying attention to. And I don't mind staying up late at night once I fall down one of these rabbit holes trying to get information. So once I'm down there, everybody else has to come with me, is my theory.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so whatever I find, I share. And um I do that Saturday show on
Right.
Black Liberation Media.
Mhm.
So we tend to go over them a lot on the show. And again, it's just a means to provide that random information because most people don't have time or energy or an inkling that this stuff is as bad as it is. Like they may have some sense that like something's not right,
Mhm.
but to take the time to look up that information, like it's a task. It's not. And if you have bills to pay and 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and you have whatever struggle capitalism is putting you under, like taking time to look up how many of Kamala Harris's advisors used to work for, big business is not
Mhm.
really a priority,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And so like on that site, and I also, well, I want to plug that you're on Black Liberation Media. Saturdays with Renee is your show. And I've been on there with you, which has been awesome. And then I'll always have people like, Renee? I watched your show. I just saw you on her show. And we had a screening in Dallas where somebody came up to me who was like, I saw you on the show and you said come up to you. And so like people know, like even when we did the Newark Reimagining Safety Festival
Right.
back in August, the organizers were like, it's funny because you'll say something to me about somebody and you're like, I'm gonna fangirl about this for a minute, but then people fangirl over you for a minute, and it's
Which
like,
I think is so crazy.
yeah,
I'm like as regular as like you could possibly get. So I think it's just hysterical to me that
yeah,
people see that. But I guess
yeah,
I'm glad that the information is helpful to people. Like
yes, and
that's the
regarding
part.
that information. So on it's isyourlifebetter.com, right? Is that
Yeah, they
yeah.
all feed to the same thing.
Okay.
So
Yeah. And so
yeah.
you have stuff on cop cities, 69 cop cities. Like you have an extensive, like a map with information on all of them. Project 2025, you did a deep dive on everybody who's involved and how far back that goes. That's not just something that came out like 2 months
Right.
ago or whatever. And then
Right.
as you mentioned, like the Harris campaign and like the connections there. So what are the, I guess what I mean, what would you like to share about that? And people should go to the website and also read your Substack and everything that's linked there. But
Mhm.
what are some of the things that you want people to know that maybe they don't know or they're not as informed about?
Um, I think most people don't realize how like interconnected and insidious this whole system really is. I find, especially now, it's so interesting to watch how excited people are about the Harris Walz campaign
Hmm.
and this idea that like, they're the better option. If we get them, like things will be so much better and Trump is so much worse. And then when you really look at it, you realize that a lot of these people are all intermingled, right? Like you have people who are her advisors who used to work with people who were Trump people. Like they don't, this idea that it's really two separate teams
Mm.
is just, it's farce, right? It's total nonsense. And people get really angry when you point out like they're the same thing, right? And they want to convince you like they're these differences. And then when you tell them, well, go look at how many of Trump policies Biden continued when
Hmm.
he got into office, um, they find a way to rationalize it, right? And then when you try to explain like Harris is a continuation of Biden, so therefore whatever Trump did that Biden continued that Harris plans to continue, it's all the same problem that's just going to keep getting kicked down the line. Um, and for some reason people don't see things as problematic when Democrats are doing them,
Hmm.
which I think is very odd. So I want people to have the conviction to be like, it's wrong no matter who the person is who is that's perpetuating the act, right? Like
Yeah.
this idea that like there's a slightly better level of genocide, right?
Hmm.
The genocide will be worse if it's Trump. Okay, it's genocide. Like I don't know how we got to this place where we're determining levels of genocide that's like acceptable.
Hmm.
So those are the things that, I want people to really think about, like really think about their own humanity and consciousness and their understanding of what it means to be a person who is living under a state of apartheid, living in a state of oppression, living like all these things that are happening here also in this country and
Yeah.
around the world. And it's all at the whim of a group of people who really they just want to maintain power. And in trying to maintain power, they have to maintain capitalism and profit and money, and it's all connected.
Yeah.
And so that's really, I think, the thing that I most wish for people to understand is how connected it all really is, and that
Hmm.
we're not free from the pains that are happening on the other side of the world just because we're here, right? It's
Yeah.
all that pain travels. So
Yeah. And that's, I'm glad you mentioned the interconnectedness of it because there've been, well, I'm aware and I've heard other people speak on this that and I'm aware of this through observation also, that the connection between the IDF in Israel and policing in the United States, and
mhm,
how the weaponry, the technology, the tactics, so
mhm,
much of what police use in the United States is tactics and technology and all of that. is practiced in the war zones, right? There was
Correct.
a former Marine journalist who talked about how there were always drones flying in Iraq and Afghanistan,
Hmm.
and how the
Hmm.
armored vehicles they brought them here didn't even change the paint, but in Ferguson and all of that they were being employed.
Right.
You look at the training and the tactics, like there's uh, the cop cities
Hmm.
are modeled after Little Gaza and how the
Hmm.
IDF trains. And so of course it would make sense that they're seeing how far they can get, and
Hmm.
they're really unchecked. Like we can say, yeah, we um the violence needs to stop, but the United States is not doing anything to stop it. Like they make statements, and now they're, you know, Israel's bombing Lebanon now,
Hmm.
right? With
Hmm.
things that would be considered terrorist acts if it
If it
was
was someone
anybody
else,
else, and
correct.
that's the
And
first
they're
thing.
threatening Jordan and
Mhm.
Egypt, and and this is the place where, like, the inability to step back and understand how detrimental these acts are to humanity and to people in
Yeah.
general are really dangerous. Because if you are falling for the line of, oh, well, they're terrorists, and you're not
Mhm.
understanding that these devices went off while people were at supermarkets, right?
Yeah.
Like, people are in grocery stores. There were hundreds of people that were hurt. More people were killed than who they were aiming for. And, in any other place, if you have something like that go off in someone's pocket, it's a problem. No one's thinking about why is this technology being utilized? Where did they get it from, right?
Mhm.
What does this mean in the future for how, these things are going to be perpetrated all across the world? And you're right. It often starts in a place of oppression. They test it, and when it works, then they bring it somewhere else, and then it works some more, and then it spreads, and then people don't understand, well, how did we get here? Well, we got here because when they were doing it to the poor people on the other side of the world, you all decided it didn't matter and their humanity wasn't important enough to pay attention to. So when it happens here,
Mhm.
that's why. So when you have police officers shooting community members for sleeping in their cars, right? Like, that's all an extension of what happens across the world, where people are not allowed to just live their lives because those officers are trained via programs that run out of Israel, the Gilly program in Georgia, like all of these things. It's all this immense effort to really have us all living under a police state that we didn't, like, nobody signed up for this.
Mhm.
but it's going to keep happening because, in the end, like, this whole thing about policing and serve and protect and communities and this, that, and the other, it's all nonsense, right? It's all to protect capital and to protect business and to protect profit. And whenever that's the focus of protection, people will always suffer.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Yeah, and so with Project 2025, which you've done a lot of research on,
Mhm.
uh, I was, well, I mean, I'm not surprised anymore, but when you present the information, it's like, oh wow, you're talking about, like, you traced it back, what, 50, 60 years to.
Yeah, I mean, some of those programs are 60, 70 years old.
Mhm.
Like, they're not, I think the thing that people most misunderstand about me when I talk about these things is they think that I'm being dismissive of the problems. And I'm not being dismissive of the problem, but what I want people to understand is it's not a new problem, right? So I can't in 2024 overreact to a plan that's been in place since 1960, right? Like, they've been working at this for years. And the reason they're allowed to continue to work at it is because the Democrats and the Republicans are all working together against the actual improvement of the material conditions of regular working people. So when I pull up the list of 101 organizations that have signed on to Project 2025, and it's a bunch of, like, right-wing legal attorneys and, these think tanks and these policy writers and, these lobbyists, right? Like they're all people that have been doing this. All they did was put it all together in a book and make a PDF and create a website. And then everybody was like, oh my goodness, what is going on? Well, it's the same thing that's been going on for decades that you weren't paying attention to because you thought that you were comfortable in your capitalist world, right? And now that they've written it all down and they've pointed out, like, here are the ways that we want to run and rule this country. And, people are panicking about it. But I'm like, a lot of these things are already in place. Like they've already made moves to create monopolies and to remove free speech, and like all these things are already happening. And so that's the part of it that I want people to understand. It's not that I don't think Trump is dangerous. It's not that I don't think the right wing is, wildly out of control. It's not that I don't think Project 2025 written down and all laid out and it's thousand whatever page glory is not like, oh my goodness, what are these people doing? But I live in a current reality where I can't ride the train without the potential of getting shot in the head because somebody jumped a turnstile, right? Where I can't fall asleep in the car because someone may come up, even though I'm wearing something that indicates that everything that I do is about improving my community, and I could still get killed in my car. I don't live in a place where, I'm not witnessing people get put on buses and shipped to other places, where professors aren't getting arrested because they're speaking out about genocide, where students aren't getting kicked out of school and refused their diplomas because they had the audacity to say, we don't want the school to support genocide. Like, we already live in this place. And so for me, I can't see this line that a lot of people seem to be able to draw for this future fascism that I'm supposed to be so terrified about. But like, where is that line, and how come I already live on the other side of it and you don't? Like,
Yeah.
I don't, we just witnessed 65, is it six, the Uhuru movement. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
got to be 60 something going on 70 years running, right?
Yeah.
And all they do is community improvement. They're building basketball courts and creating housing and supporting people, but they're charged guilty with conspiracy,
Mhm.
right? Because why? Because Black people need Russians to tell them that there's racism here. Like, what are we doing right now? And how is it that none of this in the current situation under the Democratic president, right? Not like it's all like, this didn't start under Trump. This
Mhm.
started under Biden, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't want to play this, the future is going to be so bad game, because the present is bad.
Mhm.
Like, the present's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And I feel like, it would be almost irresponsible for me as a person who does take the time to research and to find the history and to understand these things, to not simply point out, like the stuff is already happening. You can't, like, you're afraid of something occurring in the future that is already happening now, but you're not afraid of it right now. And I don't really understand how that works.
Yeah. Yeah. And in addition to the politicians and this, also part of the system is the media. And one
Oh,
thing, especially, it's been longer, but especially the last 4 years, especially the last year, uh, specifically in regards to Palestine and the genocide there. Uh, I watch MSNBC, which everybody's like, oh, that's, leftist, like they call it leftist, but it's not. But left-wing media, a majority of the commentators are former Republicans,
mm-hmm.
which is fine. And the narratives are always maintaining the system. Like there are very few people who speak out, hosts, and then they get tossed off.
Fired.
Like yeah, like Tiffany
Right.
Cross, Mehdi Hassan left.
Right.
Um,
And they're
you
not
know,
even that radical. That's the
no,
part of it for me that I'm like, y'all are really, like, everyone's playing in our faces, and like
yeah,
people are so concerned. I'm like, Mehdi Hassan is not like the radical journalist who's going to tell everybody like burn it all down. He's very like mild, like in the grand scheme of the problems.
Yeah.
And he still lost his job,
Hmm.
right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And what I don't even remember what Tiffany Cross said, but you
I
know,
think she said something about Biden, maybe. I don't even
mhm.
remember. It
Yeah.
wasn't that serious. It wasn't that
No.
radical
And
either.
she had
Like,
like the earliest
mhm,
morning possible Sunday show
right.
that I would record because I loved her show. But
Hmm.
and like I remember we did a screening at MIT outside of Boston or in Boston area back when the UCLA encampment uh, here got overrun one night with the Zionist protesters, pro-Israel
Hmm.
protesters, and the police didn't do anything. And then the next
Hmm.
night, the police came in and cleared out the encampment and were violent
Hmm.
and all of that. And I was flying back from Boston knowing that that had happened. And it was the Stephanie Rule show, which the 11th hour, which is like the last show of the night. And her whole panel they were talking about they were like, oh well, it's college students, they don't know any better, and COVID interrupted their ability to socialize, so this is how they're acting out, as if they're just like some like
Yeah.
uninformed
That's why I can't watch it.
uneducated kids.
When
you
I
know
tell
and
you I can't watch it, I
yeah.
can't watch it.
And I was on a plane, like I'm like, I want to smash something right now. How dare you belittle these students
Hmm.
who are very well educated. Most of majority, well, I don't know, a lot of them are Jewish and
Hmm.
anti-genocide. A
Hmm.
lot of them are Palestinian, Middle Eastern, multicultural,
Right.
and a lot of white students, and they're literally in college learning about this stuff. They literally have lived experiences.
Hmm.
The anti-war protests have always, been, very hot on college campuses. And, and part of me also is like, how do you become a cop having grown up with the images of the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War protests and be like, yeah, I want to do that,
Right.
like the psych and actually I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place. I'm just fired up. But like Mary Hooks in Atlanta, who's an amazing activist, she hosted a screening, and we've talked a bunch of times. There's a video of her at a protest yelling at the cops, like, "You don't have to do
Hmm.
this.
Right.
You're on the wrong side of history. You didn't sign up
Right.
to beat up kids. You can not do this."
Right.
It was like, wow, what a powerful
Hmm.
stance and statement.
And I would encourage, so Chuck Modiano
Yeah.
has a clip up on Twitter right now of a gentleman saying the same thing. Like, there are people dying and
Yes.
y'all standing here on your bikes preventing us from our supposed rights that we're supposed to have, to protest. And this is, this is right now.
Mhm.
And this is why I'm always saying to people, like, when for you have we crossed the line into fascism that you're comfortable complaining about? Because you're, again, back to that same thought, like, you're telling me to be concerned about this future fascism that's possible, that could be coming, but you're not looking at the amount of people who are completely overwhelmed by a system that is not allotting for like normalcy,
Mhm.
right? Like, after the NYPD shot a pedestrian, a commuter in the head on a train,
Yeah.
chasing around someone who didn't follow the directions because they didn't pay their $2.75 or 95, or whatever it is now to get on the train. I
Yeah.
remember when it used to be $1. Um, and So there was the response from the community was, we're all just going to jump the turnstiles. And they went down to the train station in droves
Hmm.
and they just jumped the turnstile. And the police came, they started arresting people and dragging people by their hair and knocking people down and all for what? Because you didn't pay, like this is where we live right now, where you send dozens of armed people in because people are mad that somebody trying to go to work got shot in the head by the police department chasing after somebody who didn't pay their $3 to get on the train. Like, are we serious right now? Like we
Yeah.
can't, y'all can't be serious right now. They were when the Jewish Voices for Peace protested at Grand Central Station and they sat in the center of Grand Central Station and they sang and they got dragged out by the NYPD, right?
Yeah.
And these are Jewish people
Hmm.
speaking up about something that they feel like is important enough to speak out because these are things that are being done in the name of their religion, right?
Yeah.
And they got dragged out by the NYPD in cuffs. Like like I can't understand people who see these things but still think fascism is coming if we don't vote right.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
what are we talking about right now?
Yeah. And like the investment, the financial investment into all of these, so like the UC schools here, just had their budget meeting and we're asking for more non-lethal weapons, right? College for college campuses, right? We need more weapons. The 69 cop cities that you've shared. The thing in New
And
York.
it's like 80 something now. Just FYI. I just didn't I
Oh,
can't with the map. It's
oh
too much
wow.
work. So I
Okay.
have it. Yeah, if you look at the
Yeah.
actual spreadsheet, I think it's like 83.
Ooh. Okay. I have to update my stuff. And in New York with the subways, I forget the exact number, but the dollar amount that they increased for increased patrols to handle the people that jump the turnstiles and all of that,
Mhm.
for that amount,
A thousand cops they put down there to
yeah.
patrol the train stations. They brought out the National Guard,
Mm,
is what Governor Holcomb did because she felt like it was such a massive
yeah.
problem. And, meanwhile, they're spending, I don't even remember how many hundreds of millions is the total to build a brand new cop city in Queens, even though they
Right.
just opened one in 2017. Like it's not that, or maybe 2014. Either way, it hasn't been long enough that we're going to invest however much more millions of dollars um, into just feeding this system. And, they talk about well, jumping the train, it costs the city so much money when people jump the turnstile. And I think the number was something between like 7 and $800 million,
Hmm.
which yes, it's a lot of money, but guess what? It's not more than the city spends paying off people because the police are always doing some nonsense.
Yeah.
They're spending way more money paying people off and settling lawsuits than they're spending, but they don't seem as pressed about managing that, right?
Hmm.
But the turnstile is the issue.
Yeah.
It's
And
absurd.
and if you look at the root causes, um, or at the root, they could let people ride for free instead of
Right.
spending that money on the
Hmm.
increase in policing, and
Absolutely.
then nobody would be getting harassed and killed
Absolutely.
and shot and
Absolutely.
all of that. So real quick, just because we're getting short on time, uh, where can people find you? Like where would you like people to go?
So if you go to Is Your Life Better, there is a direct link to my Substack, which I try whenever I have something interesting that I've come across or when I fall down a rabbit hole to share the information there. The current work is this Kamala Harris advisors thing that I've been on. So this is going to be the third part of I don't know how many parts because I feel like every time I research one thing, I find more interesting things. Um, And so the Substack can be easily linked from the Is Your Life Better? There's always stuff on there. But every week on Saturday, shout out to Dr. Jared A. Ball from
Yeah.
Morgan State down in Maryland, who graciously invited me to join him to just kind of talk about the things. And, the goal really for that show is to encourage people to organize and to participate, right? To learn, to do the political education thing, and to not just kind of sit back and allow things to happen, because that's what they want us all lulled into like submission and to not ask the questions. So
Yeah.
the goal is to get people to ask the questions. So that's on Black Liberation Media. We're on every week, Saturdays from 11 to 1. So those are probably the two best
Yeah.
places.
Awesome. And then just the final my final question. Looking towards liberation and humanity and society and the things that we can be doing or the things that are already being done that just need
Mhm.
awareness and support. Like what what would you want to share with folks listening that either we can be doing or we could be doing more to have those freedoms and that liberation and to be living happier, more fulfilled, connected lives?
I would say the biggest thing is to not be afraid, right?
Mm,
It is a tricky thing to be willing to say the unpopular thing, right? So if you are amongst a room of people who are all speaking about how great it's going to be if Kamala Harris can win because, whatever reason they've come up with, right?
yeah.
Like it's okay to point out that she supports genocide, right? It's
Yeah.
okay to wear a keffiyeh to the supermarket and let people say to you, like, that's nice that you're wearing that. Because I get
Mm,
way more compliments when I support Palestinians than I do anything else. Now,
mm,
admittedly, I'm almost 6 feet tall, so maybe people think twice before they talk crazy. But I do find that people are always more supportive of it because they're afraid to do it,
mm,
right? So I think sometimes people see me out in my Palestine shirt or rocking my keffiyeh or the flag in my dashboard, and people think to themselves like, man, I wish I could do that. But you can, right?
yeah.
Everybody can. Everyone can choose in the moment to do something that might not be popular, but is right. And so I encourage people to have courage and convictions, to believe in humanity, to, be open to the idea that like what you're being told is not necessarily the thing that you need to focus on. Like it's okay to go find other sources. And that's the other thing is to go outside of mainstream media because they're all telling you the same thing,
Hmm.
right? And I'll shout out Public Square Amplified. So Josie doesn't yell at me. I also write for them as a, part-time, and she's been very, very great about letting me voice these things in writing, and she's a phenomenal editor. But Public Square Amplified is like a really tiny local outlet that, if you're not looking forward and if you're not watching other things, but they do a lot of community-based work and they do a lot of political education and they do a lot of panels and things like that. So I encourage people to look for those resources and look for those things that exist, usually in their own communities that they don't even
Yeah.
realize is there, so that they can get information that's outside of the mainstream, because that's the only way you can get away from the propaganda, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually been one of the things traveling, one of the many things, but traveling across the country, being in community with folks all over that when I was doing the film, people talk about Cahoots and STAR, as the community responder programs, but there are so many more. And
There's a
like even
lot of
in
them.
Newark,
Yeah.
like there's a whole Office of Violence Prevention that has community response teams, and then there's the organizations working for housing justice and food and clothes, like all of the other mental health, like all of the other things that make a society safe. People are doing that work. It just
Right,
they're not supported
right,
enough.
right,
Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, Renee, thank you so much. This has been such a treat for me, and I know we're going to talk anyway in a day or two. But thank
Right.
you for coming on the show, and I
Absolutely.
appreciate you immensely.
I appreciate you as well, Matt.
So great to have Renee Johnston on the show. Please go to her website, isyourlifebetter.com. We'll put that in the show notes. Please check out her show, Saturdays with Renee, on Black Liberation Media. She writes for Public Square Amplified, which she mentioned. So we'll put all that in the show notes. Go follow her. Uh, get educated from her. She's awesome, and I'm so proud to call her a friend. Also, watch Reimagining Safety. Share Reimagining Safety. We're closing in on our 70th screening, which I'm wow, can't believe that's coming up, which is amazing. So reimaginingsafetymovie.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode and this podcast, please share, subscribe, like, do all the things that we're supposed to do to support and amplify. And join us next time on Conversations for the People. Until next time, all power to the people.